Fate Be Changed, Chapter 16, Merida. Merida dropped her head into her outstretched hands and dragged her fingers down her face. "You have got to be kidding me," she muttered. She frowned, rubbing her hands along the underside of her jaw. Why did it feel like bristles? Merida pulled her hands back and studied her fingers. "Is this correct?" Eleanor called. Merida returned her attention to Eleanor and groaned. "No," she said. Why had she agreed to start an archery lesson when it was obvious Eleanor was not ready? She knew her mother was sheltered, and thus Merida had kept her expectations low. But this was ridiculous. The princess did not know the first thing about archery. "You must keep your shoulders squared," Merida said. "Stand up straight and concentrate." "Maybe if you let me use a real arrow," Eleanor complained. Not a chance. Within minutes of the start of their lesson, Merida had realized putting a deadly arrow in her mother's hands would be a mistake. Instead, she had scoured the forest floor for thin sticks to use in place of the arrows. And it was a good thing she had. Eleanor had sent the sticks sailing through the air with abandon. Several had landed near Merida's toes. "We have gone over this, princess. You must perfect your stance before you can shoot with real arrows. You are slouching. That is why you have sent the sticks sailing everywhere but the target." "I do not have time to perfect my stance," Eleanor said. "Just teach me to kill a hare." "And then what?" Merida plopped her hands on her hips. "What will you do when you kill the hare? Do you know how to skin it? Do you know how to cook it?" "You know I do not," Eleanor groused. "Exactly, which is why you need to be patient and listen. My father taught me how to do all of this, but he did not do it in a day. These things take time, Eleanor." "Surely your father did not teach you to cook." "He did," Merida replied. Eleanor huffed. "Well, maybe I should get your father to teach me how to shoot a bow and arrow." Her idea, exactly. Merida knew she was taking a chance of angering Fergus by bringing Eleanor here. He had taken her a stern warning not to disclose the location of this camp to anyone, but she could not afford to wait for fate to bring her mother and father together again. Time was of the essence. They had to begin their courtship so they could fall in love before the solstice. She would nudge fate this one time, and then she was done. "Wait 1 minute," Eleanor said. She pointed to the boulders. "Isn't that where I first found you?" Merida tried to look surprised. "Why, it is, isn't it? I guess this is the one place that is most familiar to me. I would like to see a bit more of the forest, however," she added. "Why don't we explore on foot?" The Dunbrock camp was less than 60 paces away. Eleanor ignored her. Instead, she stooped low to examine the gatherings of rocks and burnt twigs. "Is this where you cooked the hare you killed?" Eleanor asked, her voice imbued with wonder. "I'm not sure you understand just how remarkable it is that you were able to catch your own food, especially with that injury to your head. How long did it take you to learn to shoot with such accuracy?" Not long," Merida said as she looked toward where the camp was located. "I must learn how to do this," Eleanor said. "Promise you will give me a real lesson, Merida." "I will," she said. "But princess, why don't we—" Just as Merida was about to make another plea to continue with their journey, a young man wearing Dunbrock tartan emerged from the trees. Merida saw the moment Eleanor noticed the man's plaid. The princess looked at her. She tightened the shawl around her head, a clear sign that she had no intention of revealing that she was a Dunbrock. "What business do you lassies have here?" the man asked. His heavy brogue instantly put Merida at ease, even though she knew she needed to be alert. This man did not know that she was a member of his clan. "What are you doing here?" Eleanor asked. "This is McCameron land." Merida jolted. She was taken aback by Eleanor's swift change of demeanor. She had transformed into a noblewoman before Merida's eyes, lifting her chin in the air and commanding respect. "Ah, Princess Eleanor," the man said. He sketched a short bow, but the lack of warmth in his voice matched his expression. Merida had wondered if the fragile peace alliance would be enough to soften a Dunbrock's view toward a McCameron. Apparently not. "I am on an outing with my new maid," Eleanor replied. "We are exploring McCameron Kingdom. I shall ask again, what are you doing here?" "Are you traveling for the Highland Games?" Merida interjected. She looked to Eleanor. "I suspect many of the kingdom's clansmen have begun their journey." She gestured to the bow draped over his chest. "Have you been practicing your archery? The princess has a keen interest in the sport. Perhaps you can provide a demonstration of your skill." Eleanor glanced at her, but Merida kept her focus on the soldier. His distrust was as virulent as Fergus's had been when Merida last visited his camp. "My maid is correct," Eleanor said. "I would very much enjoy it. I have heard Clan Dunbrock is particularly talented with the bow and arrow. Is that so?" Flattery was always a good idea, especially when dealing with the male species. Merida could tell by the way the soldier puffed out his chest that the princess had hit her mark. He began a monologue about the intense training the Dunbrock warriors are required to undergo. "Even with the peace alliance, we continue to perfect our skills," the soldier told them. "A threat can strike at any time." Merida was aghast at the young man who openly shared such information. Clearly, he did not think she or Eleanor posed any risk, unlike Fergus the day before. Whether it was due to the princess's position as a royal or because they were female, Merida did not know. But it was a foolish assumption. Two young lassies could cause all manner of havoc in an opposing clan. She had heard her father's caution his soldiers of the fact numerous times. Merida now wondered if his warnings had been born out of something that happened to Clan Dunbrock in the past. The clansman executed several successful shots with his bow. Though they lacked the accuracy Merida would have displayed, she feigned excitement at the soldiers' shooting, but sensed that Eleanor's praise was genuine. Merida had seen enough. She had not brought this princess here to watch this man strut around like a rooster. She needed to find Fergus. Sir, would you have something for us to drink?" Merida asked. "The princess and I have been traveling for quite some time. We are a bit parched." There's a creek nearby," the soldier said. He looked nervously in the direction of the camp. "But maybe you would prefer mead." He motioned for them to follow. A few moments later, they arrived at the camp where Merida had encountered Fergus. She scanned the area, searching for her father among the clansmen scattered about the area. "What are you doing here, Gottfried?" one of the men asked. "Why aren't you at your post?" A half-dozen men stopped what they were doing and looked their way. Merida wondered again why they had set up camp here. If her father's sole mission had been to speak to King Douglas on his chieftain's behalf, surely he would have continued on to McCameron Castle by now. "Because the princess of McCameron Kingdom requested a cup of mead," Galfred announced. "Did she now?" They all turned at the sound of Fergus's booming voice. Merida could barely contain her relief, although that quickly turned to anxiety at the sight of his sardonic expression. "The princess and her maid happened upon the camp," Gottfried said to Fergus. "They are particularly interested in observing our archers at work." He puffed out his chest again. "'Tis fitting, seeing as Dunbrock archers are the best in the land." "They just happened upon the camp?" Fergus asked, leveling a skeptical look at Merida. But when he spoke again, it was to Eleanor. "Is Galfred speaking the truth, princess? Have you come to observe us?" Eleanor tipped her nose in the air. Her demeanor had switched from sharply aloof to pure ice in the matter of seconds. She managed to look down at Fergus, even though he was several inches taller than she. "Your clan's prowess with the bow and arrow is well known, but I'm not sure I would say I'd come to observe you to do anything, let alone shoot," she said. "That is only because you have not seen my clansmen at work," Fergus replied. "You should see what the men of Clan Dunbrock can do with a bow and arrow. You would have no choice but to admit we are the best." Eleanor scoffed. "I would never do such a thing." "Oh, but I think you would," Fergus said. He angled toward her. "Even if you could only admit it to yourself." Acrimony crackled in the air between them, so pungent Merida could almost smell it. But there was something else there, something fiery and intense. It pulsed with life as the princess and the warrior stared each other down. With his eyes still trained on Eleanor, Fergus struck thumb and forefinger on his mouth and protruded a loud whistle. "Gather round, lads. Let us show the princess how the best archers in the kingdom got their reputation." Fergus sauntered toward a flat rock that served as a mark on the ground. With a grin, he hefted the massive bow he carried and held it in position, then pulled an arrow from the quiver strapped across his back. Merida had no idea why he was acting this way. It would only further antagonize Eleanor. He finally directed his gaze at something other than the princess, turning his attention to a target that was at least 50 paces away. Merida slowed her breathing as Fergus secured the tail end of the arrow to the string. She followed along with the steps he took, recalling the words he would preach to her during their hours and hours of practice. Her father released the arrow and sent it sailing toward the target. It struck it dead center. Merida burst into applause, earning a searing look from Eleanor. She immediately stopped, but internally the cheers continued. Her father's skill with the bow and arrow was unmatched in both form and accuracy. Additional soldiers gathered around to watch as Fergus put on a splendid display. Merida leaned over to Eleanor and whispered, "If you want to learn to shoot, you should pay close attention. Do you see how he holds his arms tight and his shoulders stiff? That will keep the arrow on its straight path." She glanced over at Eleanor when she didn't get a response. "Why are you frowning? Are you not enjoying yourself?" "Not particularly," Eleanor answered. "You are getting a lesson in archery from one of the best shooters I have ever seen." "That one thinks he is better than everyone else." "Because he is better," Merida pointed out. "He is excellent with the bow and arrow." She glanced at Eleanor's profile. She sniffed. "And he knows it. His confidence detracts from his looks." Merida pounced on her admission. "So you've noticed how handsome he is?" Eleanor shushed her, then straightened her shoulders as Fergus walked up to them. "How was that, Princess?" he asked. Once again, Eleanor peered at him. "Satisfactory." Fergus cocked a furry eyebrow. "Only satisfactory. Well, what would it take to impress you, I wonder?" "Is that your goal?" He bent forward until they were eye to eye, and with that easy grin said, "My goal is to prove to you that the men of Clan Dunbroch are the best archers in the land." "If that is the case, you have failed," Eleanor retorted. His grin widened. "Well, I can't have you going back to McCameron Castle thinking those clansmen of yours are better than Dunbroch. The thought does not sit well with me, Princess." He snapped his fingers toward the group of young soldiers and stood on the periphery of the camp. "Patrick, Simon, bring forth your bows. Let us see if you can impress the fair princess here." Merida noticed the way Eleanor stiffened as Fergus came to stand beside her. The tension between the pair was so palpable it hummed in the air. Fergus's chest puffed out with pride as he watched his men hit target after target. Meanwhile, Eleanor stood stoically, her face impassive. Merida wanted to shake some sense into them both. Why were they making this so difficult? Why could they not fall into each other's arms, recognize that they were meant for each other, and pledge their undying love? It would have made Merida's life so much easier. Alas, her mother seemed determined to remain unimpressed, despite the men of Clan Dunbroch putting on a splendid show, and her father appearing to be having a grand time antagonizing his guest. Fergus turned to face Eleanor and crossed his arms over his massive chest. "How was that?" he asked. "Still just satisfactory?" "Dunbroch is not the only clan that can shoot a bow and arrow with precision," Eleanor said. "It'll take more than that to impress me." "Is that so?" He took several steps back, unsheathed the sword at his hip, and brandished it. "We also excel in fencing. Would you care for a demonstration, Princess?" Eleanor glared at him. "I've seen quite enough, thank you." "Are you sure?" Merida wanted to scream. She wished for him to woo the princess, not frustrate her. She had to do something before this got out of hand. Merida looked up at the sky. There was a single fluffy white cloud floating overhead. Princess, it looks as if rain is on the way. Should we be heading back, you think?" Eleanor latched onto the excuse. "You are right. We shall be on our way." She turned to Fergus, haughtily tossing her hair over her shoulder as she did so. "I guess we will determine which clan is best at the Highland Games." "I guess so," Fergus replied, his overconfident smile on full display. "See you there, Princess." Merida wanted to bang her head against the nearest tree. The first meeting between these two could not have gone any worse. Actually, it could have gone worse. Eleanor could have taken the bow and shot Fergus with it, something Merida at one point feared she might do. At least there was no injuries. The young soldier, Gottfried, escorted Merida and Eleanor back to their horses. They quickly mounted their steeds and started on their way. "We must make haste," Eleanor said, taking the lead. "I have my other lessons to tend to. The Queen will question me if I am late." "And Eileen will question me if I'm late salting the fish," Merida said. Eleanor's brows furrowed, probably at the distaste Merida had not been able to hide in her voice. "Is the larder not to your liking?" the princess asked. "'Tis fine," Merida said. "I shall handle it for as long as necessary." They were forced to travel at a slower pace as they wound their way through the forest, dodging fallen branches and rotting tree stumps. Merida evaded, bringing up what had just happened back at the camp. She was intrigued by Eleanor's strong reaction to Fergus. "The Dunbroch clansmen are very good with the bow and arrow," Merida volunteered. They are sufficient, Eleanor replied. She looked over at Merida and rolled her eyes. Okay, fine, they were outstanding. I doubt anyone in Clan McCameron will be able to best them at Highland Games. Fergus is particularly skilled. Fergus is an oaf, Eleanor quickly rebutted. But his competence is unquestionable, Merida decided to push a bit more. I find him rather charming. Charming? Eleanor scoffed. There is nothing charming about that lad. She stuck her nose up in the air. And he smelled. Merida choked out a laugh. That is unfair. He and his men have been camped out in the forest. They all smelled. He smelled the worst. Merida averted her face so that Eleanor would not see the smirk she was trying to desperately hide. Well, I hope you did not allow the Dunbrock's odor to distract you from his remarkable expertise. If you were kinder to him, he might be willing to teach you how to shoot. I do not need that Dunbrock lad to teach me how to shoot, Eleanor said. That is what you are to do, remember? She straightened on her horse. Enough about him. I do not want to think about Fergus and his face again. Despite her words, Merida had a feeling the princess would have a hard time not thinking about Fergus. She would not have been so adamant in her disapparagement of him had he not made an impression. Merida tried telling herself that even a bad impression was better than none. They reached the clearing and sent the horses on their second high-paced gallop of the day.